people. For those of you who are new to NJBIA, we're the largest statewide business association in the country, representing approximately 1 million jobs in the state of New Jersey, which amounts to about 1/4 of New Jersey's workforce, offering customer development opportunities, visibility through events, magazine ads, our podcast, Planet New Jersey, that I co-host with two of my colleagues. It's a lot of fun. TV shows and money-saving discounts on stuff your business is probably already paying for, like payroll, healthcare, 401k solutions, and HR support. If you're interested in more information, I will drop the website into the chat. All right, so without further ado, today we have a special guest star with us, Alissa Zilbershlag. Alissa Zilbershlag is the founder and owner of WorkWise Labs, a company that offers individuals and organizations a way to build positive work cultures and connect employees through team building and leadership development. Alissa, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen because, of course, I have a PowerPoint that I would like to share with everyone. So just give me a moment to set up my back end over here and we will get started. And thank you for the introduction. Just setting everything up here. All right. Is everyone seeing my screen okay? We're good? All right, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Alissa Zilbershlag. As Casey mentioned, I'm happy to be here with you this morning. I have been a diversity, equity, and inclusion educator and trainer for about 20 years now, and I've worked for a lot of different organizations over the years, including Hillel and the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, the Anti-Defamation League, and my current gig is at the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights, where I'm the director of the Education and Training Unit. And over the years, people have sought me out to help them build culture in their respective workplaces. And because of these requests, I created WorkWise Labs. And this is an organization or a company that offers individuals and organizations a way to build positive work culture and connect employees through leadership development and team building workshops that center around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today, I'm sharing a piece of my workshop called Giving and Receiving Feedback. I created this workshop because one of the biggest obstacles that I see for leaders and for struggling teams is the ability to give and receive feedback effectively. And there are all kinds of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that work with all kinds of acronyms. We have DEI, DEAI, DEIB, JEDI. I mean, there's a ton of different acronyms and variations of these. And one thing that all of these initiatives require is an emphasis on building an environment that is honest, that's fair, that holds people accountable, and that makes people feel like they belong, all while offering authentic opportunities for growth. And if a workplace has this, many other DEI components fall right into place. And feedback is one piece of this puzzle. It's a huge piece. Most people don't do it. And if they do, it's very stressful. And it can also be ineffective. And it's pretty rare to see a high functioning feedback model in a workplace. And this morning, as I mentioned, I'm going to share a piece of WorkWise Labs Giving and Receiving Feedback workshop. And on the screen, you see some positive feedback that I've gotten about this workshop. I have it both a virtual and an in-person version. And the goals of this workshop are to highlight the importance of creating a workplace where everyone belongs and to give a concrete idea on how to do this. This is what I'm going to be working on this morning. The second goal is to provide you all with a 5-step model of giving feedback. And then the third is to provide a strategy to enhance self-awareness when receiving And some people call this constructive feedback, constructive criticism. There's a lot of different terms for this. For today, I'm focusing on this type of feedback, constructive feedback. This is where most people struggle. They have a hard time telling people what they want done differently or giving, forward focused feedback. And they also have a hard time hearing when others give them constructive feedback or receiving feedback. I'd like to take a moment now. This is going to be an interactive hour, so I am expecting people to kind of be with me. I have some chats, I have some polls, I have some videos, and I want to talk through this topic with you all as partners. So I'd like to take the temperature of the room today and get some preliminary feedback from you all. As you come into today's session, I'm curious to know why you are here. Are you here because you want to know best practices around giving feedback or around receiving feedback? You may want both, but if you had to choose, which one would it be? And I've just launched a poll, and I'd love to know what you think. What are you wanting to know more about? And I'm pausing. About 3/4 of you have responded. And I'm going to close this poll in just 3, 2, 1. And let's see where we're at as a group. So 82% of you are interested in giving feedback, and 20% of you are interested in how to receive feedback. So I'm definitely going to get into both. And I think it is whenever I do this poll, I have a much higher percentage of people who are looking at how to give feedback. So I do spend a little bit more time on that, and I'll be spending a little bit more time on that during this time here. So let's get into all of it. But before even thinking about how to give or receive feedback, the culture or the environment needs to feel safe. And people they need to feel that sense of belonging, to know that their ideas and their perspectives are being respected and that they matter. I know that many of you might already have positive, trusting environments where you feel comfortable sharing how you feel or voicing your opinions. Some of you might not work in that type of environment, but you have a very clear sense of what you want or what you need so that the environment can be more positive and trusting and open. I'm curious to hear from the group. What do you need to feel safe, to share your thoughts, your ideas, your wins, your losses, and who you are at work? And I'd love to have you put that into the chat, or of course, we're a smaller group today, so I'm happy for anyone to come off of mute and we can just have a conversation also. What do you need to feel safe at work?
I'll come. Hi, Maria. Hi, how are you? I'm trying to figure out how to work these buttons. So I'm Maria with New Jersey Resources News and Natural Gas. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. Actually, this year we revised our strategy to include belonging. Mm-hmm. I've been with the organization 30 years. It'll be 30 years, August 22nd.
Wow, that's dedication.
That's why I'm coming off camera. I've had a variety of roles in the organization. So I want to share with your question with everyone, thoughts, ideas. It really has a lot to do with who's managing you. Just because people have the role or the title manager, director doesn't mean they know how to develop and manage people. That was actually what was so pivotal for me in my career, was sitting there or getting, your end of your review and there's no conversation and then you want me to sign it. And it took me a few years and a bleeding ulcer to realize that I'm not accepting that anymore, right? So for me, that pivotal moment was the acceptance portion, right? We don't have to accept it, right? We need to do better at advocating for ourselves. And I take that to heart now that now in my role, every employee is my direct report, right? So taking those lessons, those rough, hard lessons that I had to learn, navigating through my career is what I brought back with me, and training our employees, or our people leaders, as I call them, to have open communications, to set up, one-on-one, pulse checks with your employees, and why it's so critical, right? I mean, we are an energy industry, and being able to know that you could play such a huge role in creating that pipeline of talent to, continue to allow the organization to grow was really critical for me. So, acceptance and speaking up for myself, I want to say, were my wins. My losses really was not speaking up for myself sooner, and, being able to carry all that to make it better for anyone else in the organization is what I really walked away
Wow,
with.
Maria, thank you so much. You just said a lot. And I think you said a lot of really important things, that managers make an environment, right? Like that people say that you stay at a job because of your boss, who your boss is, and also if you have friends. They say if you have a best friend at work, people are more likely to stay as well. So it's the people, but it's really leadership. And then I also see Jackie's mentioning in the chat that you need leadership to show their own vulnerability, their own weaknesses. Yeah, I think that helps to create an environment where you feel okay to share your wins, your losses. I think you also mentioned advocating for ourselves. I think that's really important, and that is something that with my teams I've always stressed with people who report to me, like, advocate for yourself. Tell me what you need. Tell me what you want. I can't know. I'm not a mind reader. Things like that, right? And I think also as women, we are taught to just kind of accept the status quo. And I love that you speak up and you say no, like with your performance reviews. Like, you just said a lot there. I think that's really important. And performance reviews is definitely a form of feedback that people don't always handle the right way. And so it sounds like you've had some experience in, a performance review that's for performance only, right? And isn't authentic. So thanks, Maria, for sharing that. And then Chris is adding trust, definitely. Trust is such an important piece of the puzzle also that I mentioned. And then Stephanie's adding to not be gaslighted when giving feedback about an idea to make the business function better, because they struggle to receive constructive feedback. And then in return for me to not respond with attitude, LOL. Yeah, that's kind of hard too, right? To like that self-control. Also the focus on what is not accomplished rather than what has been. Yes. So like a focus on strengths rather than weaknesses. And I think you say a lot here also, Stephanie. People do struggle to receive constructive feedback. That's part of what I'm going to be talking about later on in the session. And what do you do with that? And that's that feedback on feedback. So what do you do when you're getting feedback in a way, when you give feedback and people are not receiving it? So I'm going to touch on that at the end, but my longer workshop goes into that in more detail. But all right, thank you so much for your thoughts on this. Let's move forward and keep talking. And keep talking. I want to share with you that in 2012, Google did a study on what makes a great team. It was called Project Aristotle. You may have heard of it. They were looking to find the answer to this question: what makes a great team? And their original hypothesis was that diversity or a team's demographics and the interpersonal connections within that team would have the biggest impact in a team's success. So they took 3 years. They did this 3-year study, and they studied 180 teams. And what emerged from that is that psychological safety is the crucial factor that differentiated higher performing and lower performing teams. And psychological safety is about interpersonal climate. And what this tells us is that even if your organization doesn't have a positive organizational culture, your small team can still be successful if you incorporate psychological safety. So let's talk about what psychological safety is and how you do that. And
one of the biggest questions.
And I'm going to start us off by doing that by watching this short video called How Google Built the Perfect Team. And this man, Charles Duhigg, he's a journalist and author of a few books, one called Super Communicators. That's his most recent book, but another book called Smarter, Faster, Better. And he's going to talk about this study. So let's take.
One of the biggest questions is how to build the perfect team. And in fact, about 4 years ago, Google invited me to come spend some time with them because they were in the middle of a big project called Project Aristotle, a huge data study to try and figure out how to build the perfect team at Google. Initially, their hypothesis was that the best teams are teams where you put people together who like each other, right? They have extroverts and introverts. Maybe you need people who are friends away from the conference room. And so they looked at the data and they did experiments and they found that who was on a team actually didn't matter at all. They couldn't find any correlations between team membership and team success. So then they started looking at how a team interacts. And this is where suddenly everything became clear. Because what they found is that the people who are on a team matter much, much less than how those people interact. That you could have enemies on a team together, or you could have strangers or friends or people who don't get along, or all introverts or all extroverts. And as long as they treat each other a certain way, as long as there's a certain culture, then that team will gel. So as they started looking at these behaviors, what they found was that there were two in particular that mattered more than anything else. The first was called equality in conversational turn-taking. During a meeting or a set of meetings, if everyone speaks at roughly the same amount, then that team is much more likely to succeed. But just speaking isn't actually enough. The second characteristic that teams need in order to do well is called ostentatious listening. That basically, in addition to encouraging you to talk more, I, as a team leader or team member, have to show you that I'm listening by doing things like repeating what you just told me or closing my computer so I can make eye contact with you. If you have these two characteristics, conversational turn-taking and ostentatious listening, it creates what psychologists refer to as psychological safety. And psychological safety is shown as the single greatest correlate with a group's success. When a group feels like they are psychologically safe with each other, you unlock their best ideas, their ability to work together, their innovative capacities. Google's fundamental belief, as is true for many other companies, is that it's only when a team comes together that you actually get the best ideas out of each person and the best work at getting things done.
So what is psychological safety then? A little bit deeper, we'll go into it a little bit more because he started by talking about equality in conversational turn-taking and ostentatious listening, but it's actually a little bit deeper. And psychological safety is a term that was coined by Harvard Business School professor Amy Edmondson. And she defines psychological safety as the belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. And this creates an environment where people feel safe to be who they are. And there are 3 components to psychological safety. And I'm going to take a sip of water for a moment. These are the 3 components to psychological safety that Amy Edmondson found in her research. The first is about being vulnerable. And this is not about, and I think this was already brought up by you all as what somebody needs for an environment where they feel like they are being heard. It's not about sharing your deepest, darkest secrets and like everything about your life. At work, vulnerability is about being open. It might be being open about acknowledging something that you don't know. It might look like asking for help or being open to feedback, which is why we're here. It might be about sharing your aspirations and your goals or trying something new even. That's vulnerability in the workplace. The second component is a growth mindset. Any of you have children, you know this is like the buzzwords in schools over the last decade, 15 years or so. A growth mindset is about knowing that mistakes are going to happen and seeing those mistakes as learning opportunities. So when we've been doing something for a long time or we're naturally good at something, we just make fewer mistakes. When we put ourselves out there and we try something new, it's inevitable that we're going to make mistakes, and mistakes are where we learn. Psychologically safe environment allows for mistakes to happen. And there's this idea out there called the power of yet. And I always love this idea. I use it. I have two kids. I have a 17 and a 15-year-old, and I use this with my kids all the time. It's this idea of instead of saying, "Oh, I don't know how to do that," I don't know how to do that yet. And that's just this idea of you can grow into whatever it is. And that's a growth mindset. So it's this power of yet. And then the third part of psychological safety is about being curious and asking a lot of questions. I truly believe that a person's intelligence rests in their curiosity. The more curious a person is, the smarter they become. A psychologically safe environment is a space that encourages curiosity. There has been a lot of research on the benefits of a psychologically safe environment. These are just a few: an increase in creativity and innovation, better problem solving, improved communication, enhanced employee engagement, boosted team performance, resilient teams, more collaboration, higher rates of employee well-being, higher levels of retention, increased productivity, and so much more. This is not an exhaustive list at all. So the next natural question that we need to ask ourselves is, what can you do to build a psychologically safe environment? So I'm going to give you just a few ways to do this. The first is to be very clear on your intention to create this type of environment. Let your team know this is what you are striving for. Explain what psychological safety is. Be out there with it. Be vulnerable about it. Let them know and be very clear on your intention to create this type of environment. The second is what Charles Duhigg was talking about in that video. It's this idea of equality and conversational turn taking. If you are the leader of a team, make sure you're asking everybody what they think. You want to know their input. If you are not the leader and you notice someone hasn't been heard, ask them about their thoughts. Now, this isn't about every single time you have to make a decision, asking your whole team what they think. That's not what I'm saying. But let's say you're in a meeting and you're talking about an idea, and, it might be your decision, but you want some input for the group. Make sure to go around the room and offer each person an opportunity to share their perspective. Some people are very comfortable sharing in a group. They're very comfortable with their thoughts and their opinions, and they're going to share. And there are other people who need that invitation. When you're creating equality in conversations, that includes making sure everybody's voice is being heard. So also, if you're not the leader, I want to just reiterate, taking the time to say, hey, we haven't heard from so-and-so, we haven't heard from Casey yet. So Casey, what do you think about it? And Casey might be like, I don't want to share, and that's okay. But I'd have a sneaking suspicion Casey is very comfortable sharing. So, right.
Occasionally, if I feel safe.
If you feel safe. And that's exactly it. Right. All right. So that's the second tip in how to create a psychologically safe environment. The next is establishing norms for conflict. What happens on your team when a conflict arises? And it will. It is inevitable. There is always going to be conflict. How is that handled? And what norms do you have out there for your team members to solve these conflicts? Recently, I was working with a client who is in middle management. She's a new manager. Let's just call her Mariel. She was struggling with a peer on her team who was at the same level, and I'll call him Isaiah. I'll call him Isaiah. And two members of the department, one on Isaiah's team and one on Mariel's team, were having a conflict. Mariel was really struggling, and I was working with her, was really struggling with how to manage this conflict. And before she could figure out how to manage it, Isaiah brought that conflict to the department head without discussing it with Mariel first, and the whole situation escalated. I ended up working with Mariel to create a process on how to handle conflict within their team and how to manage up on that in order to de-escalate future situations, as opposed to escalating it to the boss, because then their direct reports, Mariel and Isaiah's direct reports, were like embarrassed that it was brought to the department head. And so I share this story with you because if they had that process set up before on how to manage conflict within their team, this situation would have been much less messy and people would have felt much safer. So this I just want to reiterate, establishing norms for conflicts on a team is really, really important. The next is to create opportunities to socialize. So you want to create them, but you want to make sure people are into them. They have to be authentic. You can't say, hey, everybody, we're going to go bowling and it's going to be so fun. And like 5 out of the 10 people don't want to go bowling. They don't like bowling. They're not good at it. It's not fun. They have to get childcare for their kids. It's going to cost them money. Like, you want to create environments and social opportunities to socialize that are authentic and that people are actually into. You want to avoid that kind of social pressure. A couple of examples might be a few years ago, I work in Newark, and the cherry blossoms there were coming out. There's a park, I'm forgetting the name of the park, but there's this cherry blossoms. And so as an office, we went there for lunch one day to walk around the cherry blossoms. It was an opt-in, it was not mandatory, and it was really nice. Actually, people from other offices, because we have 4 offices around the state, people from other offices came. I met people, I walked and talked to people, had an opportunity to meet new people. It was really, really nice. So that's an example of socializing. It was free. Like, we just walked and looked at the cherry blossoms. Another thing is employee committees. Those are really good. They drive this. When you have employee committees that can drive the socialization, it's like very natural, because they plan the things that they want to do. And in one of my jobs once, we had candygrams, and every year everyone would do candygrams. It was really fun, and it was really a really nice way to socialize and get to know people. So I'm curious with you all, and I always like to ask this question because I get some good ideas too. What have you done in your work to socialize, but authentically? What's worked with socialization in your place of business ever? It doesn't have to be your current one. You can put it in the chat again or come off mute. Love to hear from people.
Okay, I can help here a little bit. I can contribute.
So we're an accounting firm, and over the last few years, and definitely since post-COVID, we are definitely majority younger people than older people. So our org chart, instead of going like 80% 20 younger, now we're like 20% older, older meaning like people that have been there probably like, 20 plus years. And we had a committee, we have a quality of life committee, and we did the same thing every year, in and out, nothing creative, the picnic, the holiday party, and everybody come, the bowling. And now what's happening is no one wants to do those things anymore. So now we have some young blood, and now they're actually stepping up. We have a cornhole league going on right now. We're climbing trees. We're like going to ball games and hockey games, and we're doing so many more things that I hope they want to do, and because they're driving it now. And some of the adults are, adults, whatever. It's horrible. I'm getting old now because I can tell my language is switching to like.
I know you start to sound like your parents, right?
I tell them kids, they're probably younger than my kids. But yeah. So it's interesting. So our Saturday night gala holiday party where you bring your spouse, all of a sudden, like no one showed up. And then the people that RSVP'd never showed up. So we're like, oh my gosh. So what we did last year is we made it like a Friday afternoon luncheon. And everybody showed up, and then they went to Morristown afterwards, and they extended the night. And it was hard, and it's still hard because we have some partners that actually protested that event because they wanted their gala to come back on a Saturday night. And it's hard. So everyone's trying to make the change. Everyone's trying to stay open.
Right.
And so it's interesting. But you know what? We still struggle with no one wants to do anything after 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I mean it's that work-life balance, right? And people have lives after 5 o'clock or whatever the timing is. Yeah. So thanks, Laura. I do have one question for you. You said one thing I have to dig into. Climbing trees, like literally climbing trees?
Yeah, like the ropes course. There's a rope course.
Okay. I was like, whoa, that's like dangerous. I don't know if people should be just climbing trees. They're strapped in.
And I did not do that. I opted out of that. But there's all, you get all harnessed up, and there's a course, and you got to make it all the way to the top. And it's very few people.
I love that stuff. Not everyone loves it. But thank you, Laura, for sharing all that, because I think what you're actually really driving the point home is that it has to be authentic and people have to want to do it. And this forced socialization is actually counterproductive. So thank you for sharing all of that. And I love also a cornhole league. I mean, right? We actually have a woman.
I'm doing it.
Oh, okay, good. We have a woman in our office, and she always talks about her brag. Like when we have brag sessions sometimes. One of her brags is that she's a cornhole champion. So maybe she's in your cornhole league. I don't know. So thanks, Laura, for sharing all that. And then Maria's adding, we have 7 business resource groups, and 28% of our employees are a member of at least one. That's great. We also kick off Global Diversity Month with a company-wide food truck event. Oh, I love a food truck. So that's great. Yeah. And those are some really great things. All right. So I'm not going to belabor the point about socialization. I think we all get it. And thanks for sharing some things, but always feel free to put anything else. If you think of any other great ways to socialize, put them in the chat, because I think we can all we all get ideas from these kinds of conversations. So the last piece I want to talk about is to create and build a psychologically safe environment is to show appreciation. And I want to put this out there to you all again with another question in the chat or coming off of mute. What might showing appreciation in the workplace look like? And I want to dig into that a little bit, because I think when you actually think about what showing appreciation looks like, it might be a little bit different than just saying I appreciate you. What could showing appreciation look like? Danielle saying, for me, just a thank you means a lot. Yeah. I mean, saying thank you, I think, is a very common way to show appreciation, and some people don't always do it. We know that. Public acknowledgement of successes. Yep. I think that goes a long way, giving credit and acknowledging publicly. We have Natasha saying we have a bi-monthly huddle where we give a shout out to staff for great work. Yeah, that's that public acknowledgement.
So here's my question to that. It's Laura again. You unleashed me. Unleashed me. So what about this whole, the ones that don't get shouted out? Do you know what I mean? So we did
there's some people like it. I hear what you're saying, Laura. Yeah. Some people like it. Some people don't want the attention. I think you need to know your employees, and you need to know who's comfortable with that. And whether it's publicly allowed in a meeting, maybe it's an email that goes out. I think you also need to know, I work with a woman who never wants anyone to know her birthday. And I happen to know her birthday. Yeah, okay. I happen to know her birthday, but every month when we have our monthly meetings, like organization meetings, the director gives birthdays, and she has specifically said, do not give my birthday. Like, people need to say what they're comfortable with. And if they don't say it, the leadership needs to know.
Or even like everyone gets a trophy, mentality. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm calling out Liam because Liam's a superstar and he does his job and he's we're fast tracking Liam, right? Now everyone's mad because what about me? What about me? And it's like that.
Yeah, but everyone,
they're used to being, moved along like everyone else.
The everybody gets a trophy syndrome is real. I fight against it. Not everybody's going to get his trophy. I do try to make sure that I'm acknowledging everyone on my team at some point in time and doing it in an authentic way, not just trying to find something. I think that's important. Jackie, you also came off mute. I wanted to know if you had something you wanted to add here.
Thank you so much. Then my dog started to growl, so I put it into the chat because this is real time. I just feel like people acknowledge and just jump on what Danielle started to say or said in the chat is just acknowledgement. And it doesn't have to be, oh my gosh, you won, this client, you did this sale or whatever. You sold lots of cookies for my Girl Scouts on the call. Yay. It's just the little things that don't need all this celebration and trophies and things. It's just a word of, yeah, great job. I think that is probably the cheapest.
Definitely.
Happens to be, but some of the most invaluable feedback employees can. Yeah. And leadership, quite honestly, everybody.
Yeah. I think that's so true. Thanks, Jackie. And I think you're bringing up a thing, also acknowledging up as well as down and across, acknowledging all around, I think, and thank yous and it all around team and cross-functional social events show appreciation. Jamie's adding, and then Natasha's adding, I take entire teams to celebrate their successes at lunch or dinner. Yeah. Those are some good. So a couple others that I want to add. Celebrating traditions is accomplishments is appreciation. Offering incentives. So I have I run this training unit, and we have public trainings, and we have people who are registered, and we have we have quarterly contests of who can guess correctly how many people attend a training. And so we have this whole spreadsheet on Google Docs, and everyone puts in their number before the training, and then whoever's closest wins. And then quarterly we add up whoever wins, and they get a Friday afternoon off. It also is free, and so those kinds of incentives go far. Financial incentives also go far. Thank you notes, emails, and recognizing what people need for appreciation. All right, I'm going to move on but these are some of the things you can do to build a psychologically safe environment, and ultimately creating an environment where feedback is encouraged can help all employees grow regardless of their level at work. So I want to acknowledgement up is rare in my world, but thankfully for me, I don't need it. Yeah, Natasha. You do need it, by the way. Everybody needs a little bit. Okay. Okay, let's talk about giving feedback because a lot of us, came here to talk about that. Once an environment exists where people feel psychologically safe, an intentional feedback program can be established for both giving and receiving feedback. I do want to start by thinking about how to give feedback effectively. But first, I want to do a little self-reflection on how you feel about giving feedback. I really want to know. And my question here is, how do you feel about it? And there's this scale here. I always worry. I almost always worry. I worry. And sometimes I rarely, and I never. I've launched a poll here so that you can answer this honestly. I'd love to see where you stand. Has the poll popped up for you? No? You may have to click the poll. Let me end it and relaunch it. Let's see. Did it pop up for you now? Okay. All right, most of you have responded. Another couple seconds. And I'm going to end the poll now. And let's look at the results. So, all right. All of you either always, almost, or sometimes worry about it. We have nobody who rarely or never worries about it. This is real. Giving feedback can be very stressful. It can be anxiety producing. People worry about it all the time. So before going into the 5-step model that I will share with you, I want to give a few guidelines. In my larger training, I have many more, but I'm already now feeling like I'm rushing because we're almost done and I have a lot more to do. I want to just give a few guidelines for giving feedback. The first is feedback should be given as soon as possible when a significant event occurs, or at least as close to a presentation or meeting or whatever it was as possible. The longer it waits, the more difficult it becomes to give it and to receive it. And if you've ever waited, you have gotten, and then given it, you've gotten the response, why didn't you tell me before? Why haven't you told me sooner? It really needs to be given as soon as possible. The second guideline is that feedback is best received when it is done in private. And this is constructive feedback. Positive feedback for some also, as we talked about with acknowledging other people and appreciating others. But constructive feedback is best received when done in private. Don't embarrass anybody by doing it publicly. The next is that feedback should describe actions and behaviors, not a person's character. So, for example, what you said in the meeting the other day was unprofessional when you said blah, blah, blah. Not, you are unprofessional. So we're talking about an action, a behavior, as opposed to a person's character. The next is feedback should focus on one or two things at the most at a time to not be overwhelming. It will already be upsetting to the receiver. So if you have a list of 10 things, you need to choose and prioritize the one or the two that are the most important to you. And the last is that feedback should come from a place of kindness and good intentions, and not just to tear people down. So these are just a few guidelines. My larger training has more, and we dig into it a little bit deeper. I want to share now the 5-step model to give feedback. The first is about timing. You must ask the person if this is a good time. You have to ask for permission to have this conversation. So, example, I want to have a conversation with you. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Somebody might not, and you don't realize. They might be running somewhere. They might be going into a meeting. They might have just had something drastic happen. They might be starving and might not have the time to talk about that right now. If they do not, schedule a time to have the conversation and mention the topic so that they are prepared. Hey, can we talk today at 2:00 about timeliness? Or can we have a conversation tomorrow at 10 a.m. about talking in meetings? Give them that heads up. This creates buy-in and preparedness, and everybody then knows that this is a conversation that is taking place. So timing is important. The next is data. What are the observable facts? And this is about focusing on those behaviors and actions. And it's also really important in this data piece to be mindful to use facts and not opinions. So instead of saying something like, you're late all the time, be more specific. Say something like, I noticed you handed the last assignment in 2 days late, right? That's super specific. Or instead of something like, you put me on the spot to speak in the meeting yesterday, you might say something more specific like, yesterday at our 2:00 meeting, I was asked to present something that I wasn't prepared to present. That is the data. That is the fact. There's no opinion in that. The third step is impact. How did whatever that behavior was impact you? How did it impact the work? How did it impact the team? An example of impacting the team might be when you hand in your assignments late, it slows the process because other members of the team are waiting for it in order for them to move forward. An example of how the behavior impacted you personally might look like, I felt embarrassed in front of the other people in the meeting yesterday because I wasn't prepared to present. So that's the impact. The next step is solution. Now, this might be a question that you need answered, or it could be a request, an ask for the future. So when we use a question, ask that person if they have a potential solution or anything they want to say about the matter. This is my observation. Do you have any ideas about how to handle this or anything you want to add? Right? You can say something like that. Or when you're making that request for change, that ask, this may come out of a previous step, steps 1, 2, or 3. Or it may be something that you think of beforehand and that you come to the conversation with as a possible solution. So it is best to come prepared with a potential solution if you have one. Be at least prepared to share it. An example might be like, next time you want me to present something in a meeting, can you just please tell me beforehand? It's a simple ask. The person receiving the feedback in this step or before, you may notice that they're upset or surprised. They may push back. There may be excuses. There may be anger. This is normal. This is normal. And we'll talk about how to handle that in a little bit, but this does happen. And then the last step is agreement. Agree on the terms of the change that will be made. What will be done? Is there a time frame? I'm not going to go into this 5 steps anymore because I do have a lot to still talk about and only a little bit more time, but the full training does provide more time for practicing these steps. We use real life situations. We get to practice. We talk through it. We give each other feedback, things like that. So, but this is the 5-step model to give feedback. I have this sitting next to my desk at work, and it is super helpful. I wanted those to think about receiving feedback as well. And I want to give this piece. I think this is a very important piece. In order to receive feedback in a way that will benefit you, there must be a level of self-awareness. I truly believe that self-awareness is the keystone to life. I have an entire workshop just on self-awareness. So I'm going to touch on a few things here, but when we're receiving feedback, self-awareness, it's all of it. I'm going to define self-awareness today as the ability to see ourselves clearly, to understand who we are, how others see us, and how we fit into the world. And this definition comes from a woman named Tasha Eurich. She is a lead researcher on self-awareness, and she's the author of the book you see here called Insight. Frankly, I don't think she's a great writer, but her research is really interesting and really important. And I do have another quick poll because this is really interesting and it's based on her research. Thinking about this definition of self-awareness, how self-aware do you think you are? I've just launched the poll. Do you see it? Right. All right, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share those results. 50-50, baby. 50% of you think you're very self-aware and 50% of you think you're somewhat self-aware. I want to share the research on thinking about your self-aware. And this is not meant to be a gotcha. We think we're self-aware, but are we really? Tasha Eurich did a large-scale study of about 5,000 participants. And in the study, she found that 87% of people think they are self-aware, but only 13% are actually self-aware. And this is known as the self-awareness gap, the space in between how self-aware people think they are and how self-aware they actually are. How can we be more self-aware so that we can better receive feedback from people? We like to think being self-aware is introspection and thinking more about ourselves and why we do the things that we do. Tasha Eurich has some pretty strong research that challenges this idea that simply thinking about ourselves means that we know ourselves. She spent time researching how to introspect and how to think about an issue internally. And this is what she has to say in a TED Talk that she gave in 2017. I'm going to share 2 snippets from this TED Talk. So here's the first one.
Thinking about ourselves isn't related to knowing ourselves. So to understand this, let's look at the most common introspective question: why? We might be searching for the cause of a bad mood. Why am I so upset after that fight with my friend? Or we might be questioning our beliefs. Why don't I believe in the death penalty? Or we might be trying to understand a negative outcome. Why did I choke in that meeting? Unfortunately, when we ask why, it doesn't lead us towards the truth about ourselves. It leads us away from it. There are so many reasons this is the case. Today, I'll give you 2. Here's the first reason we shouldn't ask why. Researchers have found that no matter how hard we try, we can't excavate our unconscious thoughts, feelings, and motives. And because so much is hidden from our conscious awareness, we end up inventing answers that feel true, but are often very wrong.
So what she's saying is that thinking about ourselves isn't related to knowing ourselves. It is fruitless to ask the question why. It's very natural to search for causes, for beliefs, to try. very natural to try to understand those negative outcomes. Why did I choke in that meeting? But what she's saying is that most of the time we cannot know the true answer to why. Her first point in the video is saying that no matter how hard we try, we cannot dig down deep enough to see our deepest thoughts, feelings, and motives. And because of this, we end up inventing answers that feel true, but are very wrong. And she's basically saying that we should forget about trying to figure out why we feel a certain way. She goes on in the video to give a second reason for not spending too much time introspecting on this question of why. So let's listen to this piece.
The second reason asking why is a bad idea is that it leads us away from our true nature. We like to think of our brains as supercomputers, rationally analyzing information and arriving at accurate conclusions. Unfortunately, that's not what happens. Let's do a quick exercise that's based on another classic psychology study. So if I were to ask you to make a list of all the reasons your romantic relationship was going the way it was, what would you say? Let's say that in general, your relationship is pretty awesome. But let's just pretend that yesterday you happened to get in a huge fight about the proper way to load the dishwasher. Really bad. Now, because of something called the recency effect, this is going to carry an unfair amount of weight. You might start thinking of things like, I am so sick of his mansplaining. Or you might think, why the hell does it matter so much how I load the dishwasher? And before you know it, you're thinking your relationship isn't going so well. Asking why created alternative facts. And over time, this leads us away from who we really are. It clouds our self-perceptions.
What Tasha is talking about in the second reason for not valuing the question why is that why can lead us away from our true feelings and our true nature. At any moment in time, our answer to why might differ based on recent events, that recency effect that she talked about. It can cloud our perceptions because the idea of why is rooted in what happened in the past. She goes on in the TED Talk to say that asking why leads to higher levels of depression, feelings of overconfidence, and wrong answers. So if we're not asking why, what can we ask? If why is rooted in the past, how can we think about the future? What or how questions are future-focused questions. So instead of asking, why is my boss so mean? We can ask, how can I be a more effective communicator with my boss? So I want us to practice thinking about this in a more self-aware way. I'm going to provide you with a why question. And as a group in the chat, this is a chat feature, I want you to provide a what or how question for each why question that I put up on the screen. So the whys are the past, the what or hows are much more future focused. So let's practice. The first question is, why do I always have so much stress? How could you reframe that into a what or a how question that is future focused, and you can put your responses in the chat. Okay, Jamie, thank you. What can I do to reduce my stress? Do you see the difference there? That future focused question. Roxy, what tools do I need to handle stressful situations? Boom, we're getting concrete, right? Like, what tools do I need? Jackie, how can I better prepare myself for an upcoming situation? Great. Natasha, how can I reduce my stress? So you can see, instead of saying like, why am I so stressed all the time? We're getting more concrete in our thinking there and much more self-aware way. The next one, why don't they take my input into account when making decisions? So a decision gets made at work, you think it's a bad one, and you walk away going, why don't they take my input? Why aren't they taking me seriously? Thanks, Natasha. Jamie, how can I make my points more effectively? Yep. Good. Anyone else? What can I do? Jackie's saying, what can I do to clarify my position? Yeah. Am I not being clear? Maybe I need to be more clear. How can I be more clear? What can I do to be clearer? Great. Why don't my team members finish their work on time? How could we reframe that into a much more future-focused, self-aware question and introspection? How can I better set expectations? Yeah. So are people not getting their work done because I haven't set out the clear expectations? How do I, Jamie, how do I more clearly communicate priorities and deadlines? Yep. And Natasha, what resources can I provide for my team to empower them to finish their work on time? Yeah. Does your team have all the resources they need? Right. How can I clarify time limitations and due dates? Yeah. So, all right, we got it. So that's thinking about introspecting in a future focused way. And that creates and increases self-awareness. And there's a lot of great practical ways to better understand yourself in general and as a leader. Ultimately, the way that we introspect and think about feedback that we receive is just one way to increase our self-awareness. But it is very key to being able to receive feedback in a very self-aware way and in a very future-focused way. How are we with time, Casey, or Danielle?
We are just about there with time. We have a couple minutes for some additional Q&A if you want to get to it.
Okay, so I will just say, giving feedback on feedback really quickly. I'm just going to give a minute on this because when this is very common and I hear this all the time. I give feedback and people don't receive it. And feedback isn't done when you give it. It's done when it's received, internalized, and applied. So I'm not going to do this chat. There are some very common categories when you give feedback. Emotional responses, people get very emotional. People don't understand the feedback that you're giving. And the defensiveness, I think, is probably the most common. People wanting to explain themselves, people wanting, saying, I don't do that, denying it, things like that. So when how they're receiving, you have to drop whatever it was you were giving feedback on, and you have to focus on the fact that they're not receiving it. And there's different ways to do that. So that being said, I'm happy to get into Q&A, and if there's any specific questions that people have. Come off mute. You can come off mute or you can put it in the chat. Casey?
Well, I just, there was so much there, and it really speaks to, I think, us on every level. It is hard to advocate for yourself. You brought that up. So I was wondering if you had any just tips on how you even broach it. I know that as I've been professional, the longer I've been in a professional capacity, the easier it is for me. But I look at myself when I was in my 20s and how I would never speak up for myself, and I would never even think about it. So I was thinking about younger professionals as a manager. What would you do to encourage someone to advocate for themselves if they are too nervous or shy or too new?
I think speaking up and advocating for yourself can be really, really hard. It is a risk, and people have different levels of risk that they're comfortable with. Having a model, the 5-step feedback model, having a model to follow can be very helpful, and it can help support people in clarifying thinking. When I give feedback to somebody, I don't just wing it. I take that model and I literally write it out. Sometimes it's really easy and it takes me like a minute or two because I know exactly what I want to do and exactly what I want to say and what my ask is. And sometimes I go days thinking about what really is the impact or what really do I want out of this. So I think though, when you have that model and that guidance, that can help empower people to speak up and say more. But everyone's risk level is different, and I think someone mentioned it earlier. It does matter who you're giving that feedback to. There's power dynamics. There's is it peer to peer? Is it somebody below you? There's so many things. It's really hard to give a concrete answer to that because it's so case by case, right? It's so case specific.
Oh, thank you. That's helpful though, because at least you have an outline. It's not like you just have to think about it. You can kind of follow the steps. So that makes it a little easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
And does anyone else have anything? I don't want to hog all the time. I also love the cherry blossom walkabout. Sounded like a fabulous idea because we do have, there's lots of in our environment now post COVID where we work more from home or half in the office, and it is important to make time to socialize because when we have these kinds of conversations, we just know each other better, and when you know somebody better, it's easier to have any kind of level of conversation.
Right. And someone mentioned earlier that what they need is trust. How do you build that trust? You have to have relationships. You have to.
Excellent. So does anyone else have any questions before we close? Okey-doke. Well, you know what, Alyssa, you made it so interactive throughout that I thought it was great how people kind of just jumped in with their questions as we went along.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I do have a closing if you want me to.
Absolutely.
So I can close this out. I will say that, oops, sorry. I have a video to close us out. And this is a video of a performance review. I think people think performance reviews are the place for feedback. And in any good performance review, there should be no surprises. Everybody should know what's already coming. So this is a performance review and some feedback that we should not be doing. So let's take a look at this.
Can you believe it's
feedback we don't want to give? I do want to just say I have many workshops. I don't have the self-awareness one on here, which I totally should have, but I have other workshops and services. You can always go to my website, workwiselabs.com, or you can contact me directly, put your name or email in the chat. I can contact you, but I do lots of work with businesses, and it's been great to meet you and talk to you about this really important topic today. So thanks for having me.
Alyssa, thank you so much. I mean, this was super interesting. I'm going to be thinking about the why for a while. It feels like a Yoda saying. But I just want to thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And thank everybody here for joining us. And I do want to remind you of a few things that are coming up. We do have at NJBAA a 9 and Dine golf outing at Galloping Hill Golf Course. And of course, we have our 10th annual Women Business Leaders Forum, which is super fun. And I encourage everybody to check it out. It's in September in Bally's, and check out our website for more to come. So till next time, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Alyssa.